Guys, here's Landon again with another Bromance Battle Report. It's been a long time coming since the death of Warhammer 8, but we're going to try to do some Kings of War games in the meantime. So here's a Grail Quest practice game. It's 2,000 points Invade, and you may see some extra monsters in our lists as Grail Quest allows additional free monsters. Here's my list. It's League of Rhordia. It's one of the beta lists, and I'm actually taking Dwarf allies as well. I have a Horde of Militia, Horde of Honor Guard, Regiment of Household Knights, some chaff, some characters, and the big things are some. I have 2 Halfling Iron Beasts, which are just baby tanks, and 3 Halfling Volley Guns and an Organ Gun. The plan is to give those Volley Guns elite with a Halfling Engineer and shoot a lot and then hit them with tanks. So I'm kind of new to this game, so we'll see how it works. Here's my best memory of the Ogre list. I'm just going to do it from a memory. It's Ogres, and I think he has undead allies, and he's also taking a free monster. I think it's a giant. Yeah, he's basically just got some really hard-hitting units. Those siege breakers hurt a lot, and he's got some chaff. But his plan is just to hit you with really hard stuff with high toughness. I think the Ogres and his undead allies have actually toughness 6. His red goblins provide some shooting, and I think that's just his basic strategy. Here's our deployment. Sorry for the rough pictures. I have a new camera, new computer, and I'm still figuring out the flash and adjustings and everything. So on the right side, I have my Baron on an Arelez, kind of serving as just a general, as an inspiring presence or whatever. A regiment of Household Knights, a Halfling Iron Beast. To the left of that are my Halfling Braves, or just my chaff, and then behind that fence, which we actually turned the fence over so I could get adjacent with it, were our 2 Halfling Volley Guns, and to the left of that is another Halfling Volley Gun right off screen with a Master Engineer within 6 inches of all of them. On the left side of my deployment, I have a horde of Honor Guard. These guys are really good. They hit hard and they're fast. Next to that building, I have a Halfling Sorcerer. He only has Wind Blast 7. I just kind of took him as to give him the Inspiring Hat. And Wind Blast 7, I just want to try it out. Not a lot of people use Wind Blast in Kings of War, but the Halflings have one of the best Wind Mages out there, so I'm just going to try it and see if it can work. Next to him is a Dwarven Organ Gun. It will not get the benefit of my Master Engineer because it's an ally, but it's still a good gun. Next to that is another Halfling Iron Beast, a horde of City Militia, and then a horde of Shield Breakers. Here's my opponent's deployment. Starting on the left, it's the Mournfang are actually a unit of 3 chariots, I believe. Behind them is a Warlord. Next to him is a horde of Siege Breakers. These guys are really, really good. In front of them are 10 Red Goblin Scouts, and next to them are the Giant. Farther to the right, you can see a Mammoth. And his right side, next to his Mammoth, is I think that's a regiment of Soul Reaver Cavalry. These guys are extremely good. I think their toughness, or they have a defense of 6. They hit really hard, and they're really, really fast. And they have Life Leech as well, so that's fun. So they're really good allies. Next to those guys those Crypt Ghouls are actually proxied as Red Goblin Archers. It's kind of a weird proxy, but it works. And then behind him is in the forest is another Warlord. All right, I win first turn, and as you know, Invade the goal is just to get units into your opponent's deployment zone. So even though my Honor Guard over there on the far left are really good, they have the Potion of the Caterpillar, which gives them Pathfinder, so they can get through that river safely. So I'm thinking I'm just going to try to slowly sneak by, and hopefully he ignores them and just plant them in his half of the table and just score a ton of points because they're pretty expensive. But I think he has other plans. Organ Gun opens up on those chariots. Put a couple of wounds on them, but they hold up all right. Otherwise, everybody just kind of inches forward just a little bit. On the right side, my opponent was very clever over here. When I drop the guns, he actually they have 24-inch range, and I always drop them right on the 12-inch line. So if he drops his guys on his deployment line, then I can shoot him first turn. So he backed his guys up 1 inch. So that was pretty smart of him. So I basically don't get any shots with these guys. So I think I might adjust him a little bit. On the right, I move up, trying to threaten his archers because they're his only real shooting. So I kind of want to get them off so I can just have absolute control over the shooting phase. So I have a couple of units threatening him. Those knights are actually within, those cavalry on the right are actually within charge range, and so is my baron on the Arelaz next to that statue. So just kind of want to see what he's going to do here. Other than that, nothing happens on my turn. Going over to his turn, this is his movement. He pushes forward pretty aggressively, and then sends his chariots, warlord, and mammoth in the direction of my honor guard, those large cavalry. I don't think I mentioned this in his list, but he actually has a ballista on his mammoth. So I think his plan is to just bait me into a charge to his chariots, because remember his chariots have that crystal of retribution, so they explode when they die. So I think he's going to try to lay on me with magic and the ballista and just whittle me down and force me into a charge, because I just can't take hits every single turn. But it's a pretty good plan. Otherwise, he moves up to threaten my two hordes. I'm okay with I'm scared of those siege breakers, but those dogs and that giant, I'm sure I can take down. On the right side, he just sits completely still, waiting on me basically. I think he shoots with his archers, and I think he puts a wound or two on my cavalry, which is great because they have 20 shots with elite, but still they're only hitting on 5s, and my cavalry have defense of 5, so I can take that all day long. Back to my turn, I send the knights in. And position the character. The character on the Arelez is not that great in combat. I think he has 4 attacks. He's basically just a really mobile inspirer, but if he gets into a flank, he can really contribute. So I set him up for a flank charge, and I do some about 8 or 9 damage to that horde, but it ends up holding. On my left side, I open up I think I breath weapon his goblin scouts, put a wound on him, don't do much, but I just kind of shuffle around waiting for him to make the move because he's got longer range than any of my 2 hordes. I use a halfling sorcerer to push his siege breakers back because I don't want them to give like a supplemental charge or whatever, so I want to keep them pushed back as far as possible. And then I just kind of shuffle my honor guard around, really abusing that potion of the caterpillar in that river, just to stay out of his charge range, kind of playing chicken with him. At this point, I'm in his half of the table completely, so if I can stay there, I'm going to get like a 300-point bonus. So here's just another shot of my side of the table after that charge. I just wanted to show you where my tank and my braves were doing. All right, this is his counter charges. He decides to send all of his guys into my dwarfs. I don't think I mentioned earlier, but I think I knocked some wounds off of his giant with one of the halfling volley guns, who happened to be slightly angled to the left, so that's good. I softened him up a little bit. I'm okay with this because I know that they're going to hurt me some, but the dwarfs have pretty high leadership, and I know I can countercharge and probably take one of those guys down, and I have a really juicy countercharge up with the militia. Otherwise, getting dividends off that halfling sorcerer, the wind blast pushed his siege breakers back, and he's not in charge range. On the right side, what I knew was going to happen is he countercharged with both the horde and the Soul Reaver cavalry into the flank, so those knights were just dead meat. That's fine. I knew it was kind of a Hail Mary, but they really got that archer horde weakened pretty good, so I'm okay with that for now. I'm in a good position because now his Soul Reaver Cav are in range of all 3 of my halfling volley guns, and I have that tank and those braves. The tank's there to hurt him. The braves are there to chaff him up and keep him off of the guns. All right, here's my the dwarves actually end up holding, and they countercharge into the giant, and the city militia go into the red goblin scouts. Pick them up very easily with the militia, but the giant, I actually kind of whiff on my 25 shield breaker attacks, and they have crushing strength 2, so they hit really hard, but they only hit on 4s, and so I kind of whiffed, ended up only doing a handful of wounds, and the giant ends up holding, so that's really bad. So now my dwarfs are totally vulnerable to that Soul Reaver cavalry to a flank charge, so this is really bad. On the right side, I send the Baron on Arles in. Uh, the the Red Goblin archers are really badly messed up, so I don't know if I can just go in there and do a one or two wounds. I have stand a pretty good chance of breaking them, but I do the wounds, but they just roll really good on their nerve test, and so they end up holding. I'm kind of okay with this because I think he can take a counter charge from them because they really stink in combat. Um, Otherwise, I do open up on his cavalry and put a ton of wounds on them, as you can see. So I'm okay with this, and I'm hoping he goes for the tank or the Braves, and I really hope he doesn't go for the shield breakers at this point. But he does. He goes in with the giant and the Soul Reaver Cav, easily picks up the shield breakers, and then he goes into my. He finally gets by all my wind blasts and gets into my halfling Iron Beast over there to the left, and fortunately I take a lot of wounds, but I'm able to hold. He keeps plinking wounds off of my honor guard, but I'm okay with because they actually have Iron Resolve, and every time they pass a steady, they heal. And he's only doing like one or two wounds a turn with his between his boomstick and his ballista on his mammoth. So I'm like, I can take a wound or two a turn. I'm going to heal, and I'm scoring points just by staying in his deployment zone. So I think I kind of have him. I kind of am winning this freaking match right now. This is just another shot of the right side of the table as he's really wanting to get into those guns, but I know I'm going to get a ton of shots on him before he does, so I'm feeling okay about this. Don't mind the cat. Alright, so back to my turn. I open up on his cavalry uh, and just obliterate them. Those halfling volley guns with elite just do work, so but very happy with those. City militia goes in and cleans up the giant. Um, so my tank and my Braves move forward. I think I'm in his half of the table now, and I want to threaten that warlord. So I'm looking pretty good on this side of the table. I will say that I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but his uh, Red Goblin archers actually countercharged the Baron on Arles and killed him. They did two or three wounds, but I just whiffed both my nerve tests, and he so they those archers got a ton of points. But I think I ended up steam gunning them with, or breath weaponing them with the tank, and they were so weakened that they had no shot at making a nerve test, even with inspiring. So I picked them up, but I had to pay a price for it. Unfortunately, I figured those Braves could hold up a single character, but maybe not. So the Warlord goes in and just eats up those Halfling Braves in one turn. And those Braves have done pretty well for me in the past. They have pretty good defense, pretty good nerves. They're only 80 points for a regiment, but they just that guy wasn't having any of that. He just ate them up, overran, and which it's kind of funny. He got 80 points, but now he's staring down staring down the barrel of three halfling volley guns. So not in good shape. And I think I'm just going to I have to make the decision whether to pursue him with that tank or just run on over into his deployment zone. Over here, he charges the Halfling Iron Beast again, which I don't know if I mentioned was actually wavered from his previous guy's charge. So he eats them up and then reforms to face my city militia, who are ready for some action. He actually goes ahead and sends his warlord into my honor guard. I think he's hoping for kind of a Hail Mary here. I, of course, go ahead and charge in to his siege breakers. Beat him up pretty bad, but they actually end up sticking around. My honor guard countercharged his warlord, beat him up really bad, but he ends up sticking around as well. And then my organ gun opens up on his mammoth and puts quite a bit of wounds on it, and then I wind blast it back. So I think I skipped a couple of pictures here. I apologize about that, but a lot went wrong. He was actually able to get that mammoth into the flank of my honor guard, so my plan just completely fell apart. And between the mammoth and the warlord, he was actually able to kill my honor guard, so that just completely destroys my plan. My city militia do finish off his siege breakers, but then I think in his next turn he ends up charging the mammoth into my militia. They hold up, countercharge, and then pick that up as well. And my guns finish off that warlord before the end of the game. As you can see, he's beat up pretty bad. And the last shot of the game, it's very confusing, sorry. He actually moves his warlord all to the right and gets him out of line of sight of my majority of my guns. Um, and I do some more wounds to him, but he ends up staying alive. I pretty much clean up the entire left side of the table, but I'm unable to get my city militia completely into his half of the table. So when it comes down to it, I only have that tank in his deployment zone, and he only has that warlord in my deployment zone, which I think then they math out at the same exact point cost. So the game is actually a tie, but the tournament we're practicing for, Grail Quest, actually uses a point system on top of the objectives. So I did have more points than him by about, I think, 600 or so. So I actually ended up getting, I think we mathed it out at about an 11-9 victory for the League of Rhordia. All right, final thoughts. Kings of War is faster and tighter than 8th edition. Um, though it does lack a bit of the depth. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, normally in every game of Warhammer Fantasy, you always have a rules question. You have to consult an FAQ at least a couple of times. It's not that big of a deal, but here we played 4 games over the course of a weekend where we generally would only get 1 or 2 Warhammer Fantasy games in. So it is nice to be able to play multiple games in the time it would take to play 1 game of Warhammer Fantasy. So that's appreciated. We had very, very few rules questions, maybe like 1 or 2 over the course of 4 games. So overall, I'm very happy with Kings of War as a replacement for 8th edition, at least in the time being until 9th Age comes out fully or is fully accepted. And I personally plan on playing both Kings of War and 9th Age moving forward. I feel like both are very sound games, at least what I've read from 9th. In terms of Kings of War, in this game, I found that Siege Breakers and Soul Reaver Cavalry are very tough, and just like in any wargaming system, you're going to have very, very powerful units. But unlike Warhammer Fantasy, I was able to bring these guys down. I softened them with shooting, stalled them, and then took them out with my hordes. And as a Wood Elf player in Warhammer, there were units that I just couldn't deal with. So I would have to ignore them and stall them the entire game. And just hope that they couldn't get their points back. Big Death Stars, certain units of large cavalry, certain characters, things like that. And I'm very happy to find that in this game that's not the case. Anything can be brought down if you apply enough resources to it. So that's encouraging me to continue playing. And then my opponent learned you can't really completely not bring shooting. As he found out, he wanted kind of a heavy combat army with a little bit of shooting, just there to kind of soften things up a little bit. But I ended up having shooting dominance for all 4 of our games, and I think it really paid dividends because he just couldn't match it. Once I took out his shooting, there was not a whole lot he could do in the shooting phase, and at that point I had control of the game. But anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Sorry for the long break. We're going to try to continue popping out some Kings of War, 9th edition, maybe a little bit of 8th edition and Age of Sigmar from some of our other guys. But me personally, I'll be focusing on 9th Age and Kings of War. So thanks for listening, and come back.